Of course, we don't live in an ideal world, and sometimes despite our best efforts, conflict does start to escalate. So I want to explain how to manage conflict using what I call a timeout agreement. But before I do that, I just want to emphasize some boundaries when you're having conflict with your partner. Firstly, I never condone violence in the form of hitting each other, damaging property, name-calling, or any other form of abuse. Violence in a relationship is never justified and should be avoided completely. When you are arguing, I recommend not touching each other at all. I also discourage couples from trying to resolve arguments if you have been drinking. There needs to be an agreement that you will wait until you're sober to address conflict between you. Other things to avoid are extreme statements like, "I never, you always," and don't get so focused on winning the argument that you become unreasonable. Again, instead of focusing on what doesn't make sense, focus on what does make sense and clarify the things you don't understand, rather than using them as weapons against each other. That will keep you and your partner on the same team. So let me explain to you what a timeout agreement is and what it's not. Timeouts are about agreeing to take a break when you and your partner are arguing and the argument's escalating and it's obvious that continuing to argue is not going to achieve anything. By calling a timeout, you are showing that you are committed to effective conflict resolution and will not engage in discussions that could be hurtful to your relationship. Timeouts are not about avoiding conflict or stopping your partner from speaking so that you can have an advantage over them. That is control. When you use a timeout with the right attitude and the correct intention, you will agree to the amount of time you need to calm down and then come back and try to resolve the conflict in a better frame of mind. When you call a timeout, you might say something like, "My emotions feel out of control and I need to take time to calm down before I can resolve conflict with you effectively." You then agree to come back together after a period of time, and I usually recommend within a day, and then go and do something to cool off. Make sure that it doesn't involve alcohol, drugs, or driving. Instead, it should be an activity that's safe, like walking, screaming into a pillow, or even writing about your feelings is fine. It's really important that you do come back afterwards though and try to resolve the issue, because that builds trust in the relationship. It tells your partner that you aren't avoiding conflict, but rather that you're really trying to manage your emotions, or remember that word, self-soothing, and avoiding unhealthy interactions. Then what happens is the next time you call a timeout, your partner will trust that you're doing it for the right reasons because you've done it that way before. And if when you come back together, you're still struggling to resolve the conflict face to face, you might think about perhaps writing to each other or emailing one another. If even that doesn't really work, then you might need to consider taking a little bit of extra help in perhaps counselling.